All right, welcome to the channel. Welcome to realmonster.com. So today we're going to look at a shot from an ex-student of mine. His name is Sinjan. He was in my class about 2 workshops ago, and he's in the polished stage of his shot. And it's more like a sequence. I'm going to go through his work and kind of talk about the little things he can do to wrap up the shot, kind of get it to that next level and just polished up. Okay, let's check it out. All right, let's go through the shot one time and just look at what Sinjan's done up to this point. All right, cool. Nice job. Overall, I like the feeling of it. I like the energy. Posing's pretty solid. I think the cadence is working pretty well. I have mostly some comments about some camera stuff, some nuanced stuff in the animation, and then also some areas where I think timing can be adjusted potentially. So let's kind of go through it and talk about it. So this beginning part right here where this guy's running in before he transforms into Shazam here is working pretty well. One thing I would think about is as you're going through here, just be aware of this back leg right here and how we're already deep into the foot roll, and then we lock out the leg here, and then we go into frame 8 and we're already in our midway point here. I expect this foot to be already kicking off the ground, but yet we're still kind of in that foot roll, kind of tippy toe, and then the foot moves forward here into frame 9. So what I probably would do there is, first of all, to avoid just popping into a straight leg here, is I probably would take this position at frame 6 and I would back off on the foot roll to get a little bit less bend in this leg here. And so maybe not quite straight, but definitely not as much as you've got there right now. And then here on this foot roll on frame 7, I might just start to back off on that a little bit and get us closer to tippy toe here, and maybe introduce just a tiny bit of bend here. Maybe we don't want to go straight locked out. And then going into frame 8, I would have this foot probably on tippy toe at this point and ready to take off. And then going into frame 9, then I would probably do the same position for the most part, but then maybe start to get this foot, you know, kind of kicking up a little bit higher. So bring up the TY possibly a little bit right there. And maybe as forward as the foot is now possibly, but just a little higher. So I would just play with that spacing right there. And then just watch your spacing in general coming through here. See the big pop right there? You got a giant pop right there. So help yourself get into that thrust pose where he's going to go up in the air here by probably bringing this foot through a little bit more, so that we're maybe a little bit more forward by 10 possibly. And then 11, of course, bringing it up through here, right? And then going into this position at frame 12. So just some massaging right there for the most part. Okay, this works pretty well. Coming into here, like boom, takes off. That tracks pretty well. I like this right here. I think that works pretty well. Now, we have a decision to make here, in my opinion. Of course, this is my subjective opinion, okay? So I think that we have 2 options that kind of make sense here. One, because you have him flying here and then kind of ease up into this pose here, and then he punches, I would do one of 2 things. I would either hold him here a little bit longer on this beat, so we get this kind of float in from a very fast entrance, so that we have a moment to show the strength and power of this pose, where we get this nice line of action in here, and we get this fist kind of anchored here and ready to punch, right? And that way we get that nice little beat, and then the punch will have more impact, boom, going through here, and then back screen right. So that's one option. The other option I would do is not have him go up into this pose here and pause, but instead fly straight in and don't pause and go right into the punch here. So it literally becomes like a fly in, boom, and he just goes right into the punch. And that's where you pause. So I think both would work. So it's hard to decide what I would do, but I think if you're going to stay with what you have here, Sinjan, I would probably pause him here a little bit longer, like probably as much as I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 frames, and then go into the punch and come back this way. Okay. And then I think our villain here could potentially, instead of just dropping his weight straight down, you could potentially anchor this foot here and then maybe even step back a little bit, kind of thing here. And just give him some kind of wider stance, like he's ready for combat or something, and then just get him straight into that kind of like really low pose. Get maybe his arm out here. You know, just something that kind of says, I'm ready for battle here, you know? So something to think about there as well. And of course, just watch his weight too. You know, he is back on this foot here, so you might want to, you know, bring him back even a little bit more here, just to kind of sink his weight back in. Like I said, just to keep him in balance. Okay, so that works pretty well right there. Boom, comes across, and then we're gonna punch here, and then we're gonna go for the big uppercut. Boom. So there are two things here that I noticed right away. One, after the punch, he comes back towards camera right here into the anticipation pose before he flies off. I would consider letting him take advantage of the momentum of the punch and just keep him moving forward in frame, and then let him do the reversal into the pose as almost as if like a ball is going to come through. It's going to finish its arc, right? Okay. He can kind of hang out here, but then I might do the reversal of the pose, you know, through the arc, right? So just continue his momentum going forward instead of punching through here and then coming back and then trying to go forward again. So that's one thing I would think about. Just take advantage of that momentum and just boom, go through here on the punch and let him continue that momentum forward and then restage him in camera position. The other thing is our enemy leaves frame very quickly and we don't see him later on until he enters way up here. Okay. So my eye kind of competes with what our hero's doing and then what our enemy's doing. So what I might do is, again, on top of letting him take advantage of the momentum going forward into this anticipation pose, that might allow you to reposition your camera as well, so that as he leaves frame, we don't necessarily lose him for so long. I think he can leave frame for a little bit, but not as long as he is now, because there's a disconnect on where he leaves frame up here and then he enters way over here. So I would try to keep him on frame a little bit longer, just to kind of keep that momentum going and to kind of connect the dots a little bit more. All right, cool. Now our trajectory as we take off here is somewhat low, heading up. Okay, on the next shot coming in here on frame 141, we're kind of high here in frame and our guy is right above Shazam, right? And then as he comes in, he kind of dips down and comes up into his pose, right? I like the idea in general, but I might consider on frame 1 starting him down here lower and just bring him steadily up and just kind of float into that pose that he settles into. That way we're not going from bottom up and then from up down here, which could obviously happen. He could go into an arc there, but it might be cleaner just to kind of start him lower and bring him up into this pose here. That way it's just kind of like whoop, right? And then we see our guy coming in here, and it might just be a cleaner path to help our eye track Shazam and then see our guy coming down, our enemy right there, and go into the punch. Cool. Cool. And then polish note here, as Shazam punches him down, the pose kind of just goes through its motion into kind of a pause here. Even though there's secondary happening here a little bit and there's some movement keeping him alive, I think that you could show a little more weight in the character by doing like that jiggle factor where once he punches, his chest comes through here on rotation Y a little bit, right? And then might come back screen left a tad, and then let this other arm basically come up here on the upper arm and drag the lower arm a little bit more, right? And then do the opposite. Let this arm come back down and then open this other arm up back here. So you're just getting like little bits of secondary to kind of help show the follow through motion of that arm, and the body itself on top here on a rotation wise, get a nice little overshoot so that you can punch through and then he can come back, right? So we don't want the momentum obviously to continue forward as well too, straight through, because then that implies that he might continue spinning for a bit. And so it's kind of nice to do that little bit of counter rotation after the punch on the chest. They can then dissipate down into the pelvis, and then you can start thinking about what things you could do on the lower arm or lower feet as well to get a little bit of that overlap, right? So because he is basically punching through here and you're changing poses where you're kicking up this left leg here. And so ask yourself what that amount of momentum would do to not only the feet coming up here, and how the lower leg and the feet would drag potentially, right? Coming through there and then overlapping that action and getting that follow through. But then also how that pelvis would react to the sheer movement of the chest coming around on that TY, like, or that rotation Y, I mean. And then everything else, you know, just kind of kicking through there. So just getting that little nuance in there and that overshoot will really add weight to the character, and you'll feel that punch, I think, more impactful in that point. But again, you're kicking down here, right? So how would that eventually settle potentially to be more of not really a relaxed pose, but less tension on there because you kicked that foot out and now it's going to recoil back into its pose. Yeah, but overall, nice job here, kind of getting that small anticipation movement on your TY, kicking the legs through and preparing for the punch. I think it works really well overall. Okay, then on this last composition, I think we're really tight in here on our hero pose, and I think I would probably pull this camera out a little bit so that as he comes into frame, he would be not as crowded on top and bottom. So just give him a little bit of breathing room for the pose and still try to keep our villain somewhat in the space you have here now. I think it works pretty well. And then this little secondary movement on the neck and head, I think, is maybe unnecessary, where you're kind of settling in, and I would just say let him just come down into his hover pose. Keep him alive, but don't necessarily do a pose change right there. You know, I think it's not reading well on why he's doing that. Little polish note too, just watch things like this foot, where the foot is kind of sticking right here and everything else is still lowering. So it's a tricky thing to do, but trying to keep that feeling of looseness in the feet, but not too secondary like a marionette puppet on a body that's kind of moving somewhat linear. So just be aware of that. Cool. Awesome. Okay. All right, last note here. I think we're doing pretty good, I think, overall. As our character becomes Shazam here and starts to recoil, because he's going to reverse the body, so we're getting into that reversal, right? So we have like this really nice line of action here, and then he's going to basically anticipate the fly off, right? And so we're going to reverse our body and go this way, and also the pose, of course, obviously. So be aware that he's going backwards here, so you're probably going to get a little bit more kick off this foot initially. And even this one here, where this might come through, and this might even kick up here. I know you could play with some ideas there, but don't forget that your momentum backwards is gonna cause drag and follow through on other body parts, right? And so think about how you can really take advantage and leverage that idea with your feet coming through here and like really dragging that through, and then eventually getting into them back up here, you know. Because I respect the fact that you want to get into this pose here. and get that graphic shape in there so we can kind of kick off and reverse it, right? And get that nice directionality on your pose here. Basically an arrow, right? But the sheer movement of him transforming here and then kicking back, really take advantage of those rotations on the legs. Cool. And if you wanted to as well, you could think about him transitioning here and kind of pausing a little bit longer as his momentum moves back. So you still get a little bit more core here backwards as he starts to kind of push through. That's a terrible drawing. But just, you know, getting that core movement still going back a little bit longer. Very nice. And then same kind of note for our enemy as well. As he gets punched here in the face, right? Don't just necessarily go into a linear movement on the pose change here. You could definitely, you know, drop him down a little bit. You can have him almost like step out here to kind of deal with that momentum hitting him right here. And then on top of that, again, like I was talking about with Shazam doing the punch down, get some overlap in there so that as he gets hit, he actually goes past the pose and then comes back to the pose. So you get this kind of overshoot on the head. The thing can go in the chest, and the chest can overlap that movement and come back. And so you're getting a nice sense of really traumatic force to the body right there, you know? And just think about how that reacts in the core overall in general. So again, just to avoid kind of a linear movement, right? But almost like the hit is so hard that he hits his farthest point, his farthest pose first, and then comes back through not only rotation Z in this case, but like Y as well. And even down back into rotation X on the chest cavity. And then again, the sheer momentum is going to cause him to potentially like reposition his feet. So just be thinking about how you might want to deal with that change in force, right? And what that's going to do for his movement and sense of balance. Secondary is good. Don't avoid it. And then same thing here too. When Shazam hits him here, could we get little bits of just overshoot on the pose on the chest? Could the chest potentially go through here a little bit farther on the punch and then come back to settle here? I think so. Definitely. I mean, I would say absolutely sure. Yeah, go for it. Now I wouldn't go too far because I realize we're tight in space here and we want to keep our composition somewhat clean. So don't go too crazy on the polish and the overlap, but definitely think about those kinds of things because we're getting movements here where things are pretty static and we don't want to do that too much. We want to definitely have things drag. So even as the body goes up here, maybe this could, at the beginning, you know, almost drag down a little bit and then come up into this pose. Cool. And then I think on this pose here on frame 113, you could be a little bit more committed here to this arm potentially. And then boom. And on this one, punch through, right? So maybe show a little bit more silhouette there in that arm. Cool, I think that works pretty good here. Here. Be careful here too because you have a big movement happening from frame 109 to 110. But then if we look at 111 to 112, we're getting mostly arm rotation here and not a lot of body involvement. So I wonder if you could even potentially think about adjusting 111 to be a little bit lower here. Like the hands coming through here. And then maybe we even delete this whole frame possibly. Maybe 112 can go away and then you can just slam the animation back together and your new 112 is right here. And then boom, we just commit, you know. But again, you got to watch your spacing, right? Because eventually you get to this pose here on the punch, but then look at the next frame. It's still very similar to this frame, but our pose from 113 to 114 is pretty big. It's a pretty big pop from here to then reversing there. So again, watch how you handle your spacing, because it's easy for you to get these pops in positions where, boop, now we're over here, 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 all right? Like I said, so maybe the new 112 could be this pose, and 111 could be starting to maybe commit a little bit more. So maybe the head is like here now, maybe, and then goes into this pose here. So, you know, so there's some feathering there. There's a little bit of things you can do to kind of help that that transition happen a little bit smoother and still have impact. Boom, right? Okay. And then of course, little things like this as well. Just be careful of tracking objects and how you're handling. Boop, see that pop right there, and then back here. So if we just kind of look at that for a moment, we can kind of see what's happening here. Straight back, down, and then down back. So think about how you could pull this arm out and start to create more of a round movement instead of straight back, down back, okay? So just watch all those arcs. Those are the kinds of things that are going to become the polish that's going to catapult your work into areas where people are going to notice. The ones who are looking at your work, at least, who might hire you, are going to notice. They're going to be looking for all these things. So it's really important that you develop an eye to look at every single body part as you go through your play blast and really think about what you could do to improve or polish areas in terms of secondary arcs, clean spacing, impactful moments through timing and spacing, of course, and then overlapping shapes in general. Those three things are, to me, paramount to getting weight in the character, right? We always talk about timing, spacing, and overlapping shapes, and just getting that nice follow through. So anyway, very good job. Nice work, Sinjan. I'd like to see this again. So go through the notes. If you have any questions, you know how to reach out to me. And everybody, thanks for watching. See you soon.